Welcome to the Waters and Stanton Ham radio channel, presented by Peter Waters.
I thought I'd return to the subject of spy radio because, as I've mentioned in previous videos, I'm having built a replica spy radio that was introduced at the beginning of the Second World War, and it's now coming towards fruition. It's virtually completed. There'll actually be 12 units made in a location about, several thousand miles away, more than several thousand miles away, in a small workshop. And these replicas are very, very accurate indeed. They've had the control knobs have been 3D printed, and all sorts of sources have been explored in order to try and get all the original components. And so these radios are as close as possible to the originals. There have been a couple of modifications which I'll mention in the video, but I thought I'd cover the subject of spy radio, and you may find some of the content interesting. There's also some interesting videos to watch and a film to watch. There's links to those. So let's take a look at spy radio, and hopefully you'll find a few snippets in here which will be of interest to you. My first hands-on experience of spy radio was the very famous B2 transceiver, and back in my early days I managed to get the receiver side working, and I'm not sure what actually happened to it, but I still do have in my possession an original B2 transmitter and a B2 receiver, not the receiver I modified. This is another one I got somewhat more recently. I say more recently, probably about 40 years ago, and I've always kept it because I've had an affinity to this particular set. It doesn't work. It's, as far as I can tell, it's all there, but it's minus the original power supply and connecting box, and unfortunately also the suitcase. But I've still got the basics of the B2, the transmitter and the receiver. I've actually published a couple of videos several years back now about spy radios. One in particular was a true story about the Krogers, and it was interesting in as much as radio took a major part in the communication of data. Here's some clips from the two videos. And it came to his attention that documents relating to the Admiralty Weapons Development Establishment in Portland were reaching Russia. And their suspicion fairly quickly fell on somebody called Harry Houghton. Could Harry and Ethel be working together? But of course they had to work pretty quickly now, because what was this connection with the bungalow in Ruislip in Middlesex? Peter and Helen Kroger, who were spies and convicted back in 1961. They lived in Ruislip in a bungalow, quite a normal bungalow. I've got some photographs here of the transmitter or transceiver that I think they were using. MI5 were onto them. It's worth watching both these videos to get the full fascinating story, and I'll leave a link below this video to these videos so you can watch it in your own time. Now, if you'd like to watch the full film about this, there's a film called Ring of Spies, and it takes you right back to the naval base where it all started, how the information was taken to London by train, it was passed to the Krogers passed it on to Moscow, etc, etc. It's a really gripping film. So if you want to watch that, it's still available. Go onto the internet and you'll find it. Ring of Spies.
This is the story of 5 real spies. A ring of spies.
How we got on?
I haven't.
Nothing?
Not a thing.
What are you asking then?
Simply to leave the safe door open for a few minutes on Friday afternoon.
How do you recognize a spy? These ordinary-looking people engaged in that most extraordinary, most hazardous of all professions, spying.
One of the interesting things about the early spy radios were they were very similar to some of the ham radio gear that was being used. Bear in mind that the spy radios probably were being developed in 1938-39 prior to the outbreak of the war, because I think it was fairly obvious that such equipment was needed. And I've just been having a look at some of the circuits in 1938 published in the ham radio magazines. Very simple but very effective. Take a look. Now let me take you to this secret location, many thousands of miles away, where some superb replicas of spy radios are being built. And the radio we can look at today is known as the paraset. It's a 2-valve receiver and a single-valve transmitter, which was one of the very first spy radios used during the Second World War. And here on the screen you can see a little booklet which the RSGB I think still have in stock if you want to build your own version of it. The receiver used two 6SK7 metal tubes which acted as a regenerative detector and amplifier, so it was able to receive CW and AM signals. And the transmitter was a single 6V6 crystal oscillator which generated around about 4 watts or so. The frequency coverage was in two bands, 3.3 MHz to 4.5 MHz, so that covered the 80 metre band, and 4.5 to 7.6 MHz, which meant to say that covers the 40 metre band and also the 60 metre band. So with this transceiver you could actually cover 3 of the current ham radio bands. I have to confess I don't ever recall hearing one on the air when I was first licensed way back, but I guess there was the odd one that was used for ham radio use, but I don't actually recall working anybody using one. Interestingly enough, there were 2 danger points with this radio. The first was that the headphones were connected directly to the anode of the audio amplifier receiver side via a single capacitor. Now that anode has something like 250 odd volts on it, so it meant to say that if that capacitor failed, then the operator would have 250 volts or so across his ears, which wouldn't be very healthy. I'm not sure whether that actually happened. But the other problem with the radio was that, like all regenerative receivers, it does radiate a signal, and it meant to say that the enemy could at close quarters detect the use of one of these transceivers or receivers because it radiated a low level signal. They did subsequently change from a wooden box enclosure to a metal box enclosure. I'm not sure whether that made much difference, but anyway, there were 2 danger points there. Here we see one of the units partly built and checking the tuning and reaction controls.
It tunes just fine. Now, pin 8, according to the schematic for the audio amplifier, should be around 240 volts given 360 volt input. Everything's checking out so far. So a quick trial of audio quality. As mentioned previously, this Sony rechargeable Bluetooth speaker with auxiliary in is sensational.
Visa offers 2 pathways to residency, a minimum investment of $5 million over 3 years and higher risk ventures.
Max working limit for a 6SK7 on the anode is 250 volts, and we're operating the audio amp at about 215 at the plate. We're not using an inductor, we're using a audio output transformer, so that's fine. It's loud enough with a Sony portable speaker. We're set to 80 meters, receive, and on 0, so the bottom of the band. Here we have the regeneration control. You hear it go into oscillation. Then we'll do 40 meters and full range. But the great thing is, at least we know these crystals oscillate, and yeah, they'll be tested in the crystal socket. And yeah, at some point I'll do another video of the transmitter, of spotting the transmitter and receiver circuit in order to basically tune the receiver whilst the key's depressed in net position.
So that was the earlier days of the development of the first radio, but now production line is well ahead, with 12 units nearing completion in their wooden boxes, all tested. Incidentally, the audio output has now been modified, so there's an audio transformer there, so there's no risk of you electrocuting yourself with headphones. Also, there's an inclusion of a net facility, which means to say that you can now check the tuning of your receiver, so you're dead on the frequency of your transmitter. One of the other interesting things is that this unit's going to come with what was originally a vibrator pack in order to allow it to operate from 12 volts. But what they've done is they've got some original vibrator units, and they've modified them and built into them a solid state circuit that replaces the actual original vibrator pack. So everything looks as it was original, but things like the vibrator pack, they've now modified it so that it looks like a vibrator pack, but in actual fact the vibrator plug-in units are solid state. Well, 80 years on, we've got something like the Yaesu FTX-1 field. Gives more power output, much better receiver, does all sorts of tricks, but yes, it is 80 years on. But the fun of the paraset is its simplicity. It takes me personally back to my early days. The very first receiver I ever built was a 2-valve regenerative receiver. I had great fun with it. And this paraset has an almost identical receiver, although it's much better built than my home built one. Now, going back to the Krogers, there is a sad side to this which I don't think I've mentioned before, at least not in any detail recently. The Krogers lived in a bungalow in Ruislip, and MI5 were very keen to learn what was happening, who was visiting their bungalow. And so they went across the road to a house which had a good view of the bungalow. And they spoke to the residents, a man and his wife and a young daughter. They spoke to the husband and wife, and they said, "We need to have access to one of your rooms upstairs so we can watch the bungalow." I don't think they gave them all the details, but they certainly gave them a bit of information. And the woman in particular said, "Well, look, they're friends of ours, we're friends with them." And they said, "Well, that may be the case, but we need access to one of your rooms upstairs to observe the bungalow." So the husband said, "Well, how long is it going to be?" And they said, "As long as it takes." Well, I think they had somebody upstairs in the house for at least several weeks, if not longer, maybe ran to 2 or 3 months. And there was great stress, particularly on the woman, because she was very friendly with the Krogers. She didn't know they were spies. She said, she was friends with them. And they said that if they come over and to see you, you've got to maintain that friendship. You mustn't say anything about us upstairs. And they were really sort of sworn to secrecy, and very frightened, I think, at the same time. Well, the room upstairs was occupied by one of the MI5 officers 24 hours a day. Obviously they switched shifts, but it was a lot of stress on the woman. And sadly, after it was all over and the Krogers were arrested and so forth, her health declined very rapidly, and she died within a few months of the Krogers being arrested. So a very sad story. Somebody that was totally innocent, but was in the wrong place at the wrong time and had to give her house over to MI5, but maintain friendship with the people that she knew were being spied on by MI5. So So there we are, spy radio, fascinating story. There's many other untold stories, I'm sure, but that's the bit that fascinated me. The reason I actually got involved in the story is because I used to be involved in amateur dramatics, and there was a play called Pack of Lies, which was centred not so much on the Krogers, but centred on the stress that this family across the road suffered. And that was how I came across the story, and it all sort of linked together with radio, etc, etc. There we are. Okay, well, many thanks for watching this video. As usual, thank you for your support on this channel. It's much appreciated. A little bit different this time, but I hope that there's some content there that you found interesting. In the meantime, you take care, enjoy your ham radio, and as usual, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.